Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dan Nessel Show. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. Espavo. Dedicated listeners may remember the last time I used that greeting, but in case you don't, it means thank you for taking your power. It's supposed to be an ancient Lemurian word. I don't know really what that means. But, there's no greeting I can think of that's more appropriate for my guest today. She's an award-winning marketer and a communicator, a former executive at UPS who left that company to become the CMO of the world's largest publicly funded charity organization. And she's the chair of the American Marketing Association's Ethics Committee. And those creds alone would give us so much to talk about. But over the past 3 years, she's been through a crucible. You see, like so many women, she's endured sexual harassment, verbal abuse, and underhanded retaliation at work. Why? Because she had power and chose to stand up for herself and others. It cost her dearly. But she's written an amazing memoir of the ordeal, and, in her own words, her story has become her purpose. So, Espavo, thank you for taking your power, and welcome to the show, my friend, Lisa Bowman. Lisa, it's so good to see you.
Dan,
and
great to be here. And I got to jump in. When you started off with Espavo, it took me back to how we first connected. And that is through the almighty and Adrian Wallace.
The almighty Adrian Wallace.
Yep. And
who
so
taught me that word.
I listened to that episode. That was the first time that I had actually listened to your show.
Thank you. And it's the exact same way I started the show, with the word Espavo. And that's, you stole my thunder there. I was going to say, I was going to give a shout out to Adrian. No, thunder's for the stealing. I was going to shout out to Adrian because she put us together. Good people bring good people, and you can't get any gooder than Adrian. She is just a delightful soul. And, she's one of the only other people I've met who, like, that word really means, like, it's synonymous with her in my mind. But now it's synonymous with you too, because as I mentioned a little bit in the intro there, you've written this great book called Harasshole, and that portmanteau of harass and asshole is absolutely apropos of what's in the book. And it's a harrowing journey, to say the least. Normally when I have folks on the show, I ask about, like, what's your story? How'd you get here? What's your journey? Your journey is the book in so many ways. And you've laid down how you got here in your book. So I think for our listeners, as we talk about you and your life and your career, it's all also talking about the book. So we're going to sort of mix and mash that conversation in and go back to the book whenever we want to. And, we'll learn a lot about what the hell happened over at, can I say it? Can I say United Way? I'm going to say United Way. I just said it. United Way, which has undergone all kinds of problems if you even do a little bit of wikiing on the topic. But, in particular, I do want to stress the United Way, and you do as well, that the United Way does do a tremendous amount of good in the world. And this is not about the good that the organization does, or it doesn't detract from that. But it is really important to know that every organization is run by people. People are fallible. Sometimes you have some bad apples. And Lisa, you ran into a bushel of them. I mean, in your experience. So, look, you're this killer marketer. You're at UPS. How did you end up going from being in private industry, at arguably one of the premier companies of the world, and deciding to head into charity, and then where that all led?
That's a really good question, because I think that sometimes the universe guides you down a path. And sometimes when you're on that path, you don't know where it's leading. But for me, I had spent 12 years in marketing at UPS, loved the company, loved what I was doing, and was afforded an opportunity in, I think, late 2009, maybe 2010, to take a role in the UPS Foundation. And what was kind of ironic about the whole thing is that the foundation sat in HR. I'm a marketer. Like
Mhm.
no self-respecting marketer wants to go to HR, right? No disrespect to the HR peeps,
No,
but come
no
on.
disrespect, and I've got to put in a little bit of an advertisement here for my own HR team at Lixel where I work, and because they are phenomenal. I love you all. You are fantastic. I love working with HR. I mean, I'm on the communication side. I do a lot more with HR these days, but I would stack up some of my HR people to any marketer any day of the week, anytime at Lixel. I just had to say that because I know some of them might listen, but it's true. Anyhow, sorry.
Now back to our regularly scheduled program after
Back
that.
to our regularly scheduled program. Apologies.
But so I had been asked to take this role in the UPS Foundation, which I was thrilled about because I was like, what a cool opportunity to, number one, be the first marketer in the foundation and be able to use what I do as a marketer and a communicator for this bigger purpose. That was really appealing to me. So day one, I show up for work and I'm sort of the de facto CMO of the foundation. The role technically doesn't exist on paper because of the structure, but I have responsibility for all of the marketing and communications. I have a portfolio that I'm managing, a $20 million investment portfolio of diversity investments. And when I tell people that, they kind of look at my face and they're like, you had diversity? Yes, I did. But, and then I got a gift with purchase my first day of work. I showed up and my boss, the president of the foundation, said, hey, you know what? I think I'm actually going to give you the company's United Way campaign too. We've had the same person running it for 5 years, and I think it could use fresh eyes on it. That was the moment that I started to crumble inside because what I will tell you all day long is, there's confusion in the marketplace between marketing and sales sometimes. I don't do sales. I will tell you all day long, I'm not a salesperson. I can't close a deal to save my life. There was only one that I ever closed, and that's actually how I ended up at UPS, and that's a whole nother story. But the whole thought of having to hit up my coworkers for a donation to United Way petrified me, mostly because I'm a really social creature. And I was like, nobody's ever going to sit down for coffee with me in the cafeteria again. They're going to figure I'm here with my hand out. I was like, I don't want to be that, like the kid in the cafeteria that's sitting by themselves at lunch. But I approached it as any marketer would. And I just looked at it differently and grew the campaign pretty significantly. It grew from 48 million to about 65 million while I had it. Fast forward to 2015, I got a random phone call from the CEO of United Way, who told me that he was looking for a new CMO. And verbatim, before I go spend $100,000 on insert name of big executive recruiting firm here, you've shown me that you know how to market us because of the growth that you've achieved at UPS. Would you be interested in the job? And it really took me aback because it came out of the blue and the job was in DC. I live in Atlanta. I was not about to relocate. I love DC, but husband's job is here and myriad of other things. And so I basically said, listen, I'm interested, but I can't move to DC. And his response was, can you fly? Well, I can't, but Delta can. When I live in a city with the world's busiest airport. So, but long story short, I remember going home after I had that conversation and telling my husband, I'm like, I got a job offer today. And he's like, oh, that's great. I didn't know you were looking. I said, I wasn't, but this kind of fell out of the sky. And so, as I told him about it, he looked at me, he was like, this is what you're supposed to go do. He said, it's really clear to me, like when you talk about purpose and you talk about the work that you do, you light up. And I think that this is, what you're meant to go do. And so it was a really tough decision because I didn't want to leave UPS.
Can I ask you about that a little bit in a little more depth? Because we talk a lot about purpose on my show here, and I've had some wonderful people talk about it, Adrian notwithstanding. I mean, just some wonderful discussions. And here you are at one of the leading organizations of the world, right? I mean, high-powered marketing executive. And in your book, you do describe how people move around within UPS. And it was inevitable that you would have moved to another marketing role within the company at some point, perhaps even higher, and you're on a path. And you had a great career at UPS, 15 years, with, some killer achievements. UPS store, that's yours, right? I mean, let's not be too humble. I mean, you could be humble, but that's a hell of an achievement to take, mailbox, et cetera, and just say, we're going to call it the UPS store now. I know it took a couple of years for that to happen, but brand marketers, anybody who's done mergers and integrations, I'm sure that's a case study of success. But I digress. You got to this point where you're really climbing the corporate ladder, for better or for worse. What was the passion about United Way? What was the driver for that particular organization or for charity in general? Because there's different kinds of charities, different purposes. What was driving you?
So I think that, I loved the work that I was doing in the foundation, but it was one foot in and one foot out, because when you're in a corporate foundation, you're funding other organizations. You're using the company's resources, right, to do good in the community, to bolster reputation, to support causes that are important to the community and the company. And so I think what ultimately tipped me over the edge and gave me the decision that I was going to leave when this came up was that it was that opportunity to go fully into the work. And there was a little reconciliation that I had to do in my head, because to your point, I had had a lot of jobs. I had something in mind that I wanted to do at UPS, and I think I was probably on a path to achieve that, although I don't know for sure. But I think that what really got me was the realization that this was front and center with the work, and that I wasn't hurting UPS by leaving, because I was like, all right, wait a minute. I'm a good marketer. I'm actually a really damn good marketer. But reality is UPS is going to make the next $1 billion of revenue with or without Lisa Bowman here. That was a fact. And so the notion of taking my skills to that next step and using them to make sure that somebody somewhere that I was never going to meet was going to have a better day tomorrow because of the work that I did today or maybe yesterday, that was the tipping point for me in my decision to leave. I was like, this is that opportunity to more fully embrace this notion of doing what I do for a bigger purpose than just generating another $1 billion of revenue for a Fortune 50.
Yeah, that makes sense. So in that spirit of giving back, but actually being able to exercise your professional skills, your career in the direction that you wanted to go. I mean, you were hired as a CMO, so it wasn't just about, hey, I'm doing good. It was I'm doing what I can do better than anybody else, and doing good at the same time. And it was that convergence. I think that seems to be where you're getting at there.
Yeah, it was that, and it was the fact that because of the relationship between UPS and United Way, I wasn't going very far away. I mean, I ended up leaving UPS with the full blessing of the CEO at the time. I think that the executive team there understood why I was leaving and knew that I wasn't going to be far away. It would have been a much different scenario if I said, hey, I'm out of here. I'm going to work for FedEx.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But, this was a longstanding relationship between the two organizations. And so I think that they were as cool with it as they could be, candidly.
And what did UPS, what did United Way, the U confused me for a second there. What did United Way actually need from you immediately? Why was the CEO so eager to grab you? Because obviously you had some familiarity with the organization, but what did they need?
So my main charge when I got there was they needed brand marketing. United Way had, and still has, I presume, really high awareness, right? And I used to test this all the time when I was commuting to DC, because I've got the magnet on my forehead that says, please put the weirdest person on the plane next to me and have them start a conversation with me. And I like a window seat, so I'm always trapped. But inevitably, when I would start my week off with my commute to the office, I would get some, usually guy, that would get in the middle seat, strap himself in and look at me and go, you going to DC? Yeah, we both are. I think that's where the plane is headed.
So on my ticket.
Yep. And so, next question is, you going sightseeing or is this a business trip? I'm commuting to work. Do you work for the government? No. And, I can be the queen of one word answers when necessary,
Yeah.
but sometimes people don't take a hint. And so, well, what do you do? I work for United Way. Oh, yeah, great organization. I worked at a job and we had to give to them. And so at that point, right, the marketer in me would turn around and go, cool, I'm going to give it back here because I have a research subject that's captive for the next hour and a half. Do you actually know what United Way does? No, but I know they're really good and I gave them a lot of money, right? So then I could educate them. But I say all of that to say that United Way enjoyed that really high brand awareness, but nobody knew what they did. And the model is to go into the workplace and solicit employees in an annual campaign. The complexion of the workplace is changing, right? And so the baby boomers, Gen Xers that grew up with United Way, that grew up saying, okay, I'm cool with this, when their company said, we want you to give to United Way, they're aging out. And the next two gens that are coming behind them, they want their company to give them that opportunity to express themselves philanthropically and to volunteer, but they don't want to be told with whom they have to do it, when they have to do it, how they have to do it. I remember when I first started at UPS, during my onboarding, I got handed a United Way pledge form. And the HR person, because I love HR people, looked at me across the table and smiled and said, oh, we support United Way, and we're sure as a new employee, you'll want to support United Way as well. And they pointed to the form, and there was a little paragraph there that basically said, at your level, the recommended giving amount to be a leadership giver is X. And I had no idea who United Way was, but very rapidly in my head, I was like, if I don't do this, I'm going to end up on a blacklist of people that never get promoted. So I better fill out the damn form. So I remember looking at them and smiling and saying, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm happy to support this. And I filled out the form, and $750 came out of my paycheck. And I had no idea where it was going or who United Way even was until that fateful day that I ended up in the foundation, right? Then, as a marketer, right, my job was to tell every single UPSer how fabulous United Way was and why you were supposed to give to United Way. But at United Way, my job was to make sure that we were curating and cultivating the next generations of donors and making sure that we had a message that was really articulate and really concise, because people didn't understand what we did. And so that was really the first order of business when I got there, was to figure out how we talked about ourselves, both internally and externally.
So can I ask a rudimentary question here,
please.
actually? So, United Way, I remember maybe TV spots or some like different ads I saw when I was a child. I didn't see a lot. I haven't seen much since, but it's an amalgam of a lot of different United Ways, right? It's almost like a franchise situation in some ways.
It's exactly like a franchise situation. And, all kidding aside, like my experience with working with the UPS store, which is also a franchise network, was really, really helpful in terms of my walking in and understanding the structure and the culture at United Way.
So I'm cheating a little bit because this was in the book, but I am curious as a marketer and as a communicator. It sounds like you had a really big communications challenge, really big marketing challenge here. You've got to reach new audiences who, let's be frank. Now, any marketer has to continuously shift the way that they try to reach new audiences, because audiences get smart, move on, and we have to figure out ways to get to the next one, like always, constantly. So, but in this case, you have to reach them and do the thing that is really hard to do, which is just ask them to give you money for no product in return. You just for good, out of the goodness of your heart, right? So anyway, you're looking for all this new audience, and at the same time, I guess working for what would be the equivalent of the HQ, right? So the worldwide, United Way Worldwide. You also had to wrangle all of the individual United Ways to get on board with what you are trying to do. Is that an accurate summation?
Yeah, 100%. Okay. It is structured like a franchise. And so I had to do a lot of selling through influence, right, to get these folks on board, because there was limited governance with how the brand worked. And a lot of that got tightened up during my tenure there. But I think part of the challenge, Dan, was that because of the structure of United Way, each United Way worked a little bit differently in their own community to address the issues in their community. It all fell under three really big focus areas of health, education, and financial stability. But how they did it and what they focused on locally was very different. And as a result of that, the messaging had gotten really fractured. And there wasn't a cohesive brand message within our own network. If I were to pull 10 random United Way people up on the stage at an event and say, elevator pitch, tell me very quickly, who is United Way? What do you do? And, pardon the language, but why should anybody give a shit? I'd get 10 different answers. And so we had lost our way with being able to talk about ourselves at both a network level and at a master brand level. And so that really was sort of my challenge when I got there, was to figure out how to bring all of that together, how to craft that messaging that worked across what everybody was doing, make it flexible, make it customizable, but build back the brand equity that had been lost over the years.
So you had a house of brands that was all the same brands.
Yeah, kind of. In theory,
it's an interesting problem to solve as a marketer. And I think you said that you had to lead by influence and make those changes, because the franchisees, I suppose, I don't know if they're what they're called, whatever the chapter leads or the presidents or whoever they are, they had power to make those changes or not, right? At the local level, did they have to be did the worldwide supersede their decisions, or was it something left up to them?
So, like any organization, right, there were brand guidelines and things that were supposed to be followed, but they weren't always adhered to. And so I remember, there's certain things through your career that stick with you. And this is one of those moments that just makes me laugh hilariously. But shortly after I got there, I had a local United Way send me something, and they wanted to know if I would approve it for them. And what they sent me is, so again, if the people listening aren't familiar with the United Way logo, go Google it, but it's a hand with a person in it underneath a rainbow. And there's all kinds of symbolism, right? It's a helping hand, you're lifting somebody up, rays of hope, blah, 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 the brand stuff. But this local United Way they were doing some kind of promotion with the dentist's office. And so they had replaced the center of the logo with what looks like the emoji that's got the big smiling teeth and braces on it. And they sent it to me and they were like, is this okay? I'm like, no, it's not okay.
No.
It's not, you can't do that. So there were a lot of liberties taken, a lot of things that never came across my desk that I didn't see. Obviously, right? Because sometimes better to ask forgiveness than permission. But, I think from a business perspective, what I needed to help this network understand is that what they had been doing was not working. Revenue was declining, trust and awareness in the brand was declining, and we didn't have a solid message. So there was a lot of work done to build a business case around the messaging that was developed, test it, all of the typical things. And I think that part of it was that what I brought to the table was that corporate marketer perspective that you don't see in the nonprofit sector. And so the challenge is you have to do that on a nonprofit budget, right? You don't have millions and millions of dollars to go out and message test and do focus groups and various iterations of creative. But we got it done on a shoestring budget and built the business case. And, I think one of my proudest moments, candidly, was that by the end of the first year, when we had rolled out our new brand work, I had 70% adoption of an independent network that was under no obligation to use this stuff.
That's a massive success.
Yeah, I was happy about it.
When you think about it, what's because you have to ultimately you come down to incentives sometimes, and what's the incentive for people to change when they don't have to change? And you do some examination and some plumbing the metrics on these things, and you come up with some surprising answers. But in this case, it had to be persuasion and influence and just good quality example that they could follow.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a matter of just showing them how this would work and that it would work. I mean, the metrics and the message testing and the brand testing that we did were all there, but it was also a really radical departure from anything United Way had ever done. Like you mentioned, having seen United Way commercials when you were younger. Part of what we learned through the research is that when we looked at the current messaging, and this is not to be negative about it, but it wasn't working. And the reason it wasn't working is that the messaging that was there when I got there showed people from different walks of life in Live United t-shirts, right? So you would see a Black person and a white person, a young person, an old person, a man, a woman, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Opposites, but together for the same thing. Nobody understood what United Way did or why they should give them money, because what we heard when we did research was, I don't see the work. I see like all of these shiny, happy people wearing these t-shirts. So I guess the work is done and things are better. So why would I give you money?
Yeah, where's the money go?
Yeah, where does it go? What do you do? And so that really became the crux of the new creative and the new brand work, was to show the problems. And I remember being really bold with it and taking it right up to the edge where I was like, I'm not sure the networks are actually going to run this for us, because we stopped just short of showing somebody sticking a needle in their arm. You saw them heating up a spoon, you saw them tying off the arm, you saw the needle. You didn't see the needle pierce the skin. But I remember when I was doing my calls with the networks to actually pitch this, like holding my breath and going, oh my God, I hope they don't say, like, we're not going to play this, it's too graphic. But it really was that graphic slap across the face that got people's attention, because it was different. And so often with nonprofit marketing, you don't have a typical story arc, right? Where you've got an end, a middle, and a close. You kind of have the beginning and the middle. I think about the commercials for some of the animal charities that you see, particularly around the holidays, right? I turn them off. Like, I cannot watch those. But that's because they don't ever solve the problem. So you see the starving dog, the freezing dog. You hear the ask for help this animal. What you never see is that animal in somebody's backyard with a little boy throwing a ball for it. You never see it curled up by somebody's feet in front of a warm, cozy fireplace. They leave you hanging with that imagery. And so in nonprofit, that's what's known as poverty porn. And they leave you on that image, right? And that image is supposed to trigger you. But as a consumer, if I don't understand how my donation fixes that problem, and I don't see that, you're not closing it for me. You're not closing the loop. You're not telling me the whole story that makes me say, I get it, and yes, I'll give.
Especially now, I think, where there's competition. Like it used to be maybe that, I remember even when I was a kid, you give to UNICEF because everybody does. There's a can, put your coins in the UNICEF can or the Hadassah can or whatever the can is, there's a can. You put your coins in there and you've done your bit for charity, and, that's what you do. But as we get older and as technology has changed and as we get, as the media landscape has fractured and exploded, and, the difference between like you and I grew up around the same time, we're Gen Xers, right? I mean, the best generation, by the way.
Yep.
But we are Gen Xers. So we've seen it from going from, a clicker and manually turn the channel to a wired remote control, which is a box of buttons, to the actual remote, to like 500 stations in the course of a very short amount of time. And then suddenly the internet comes along. Point is, there's a lot of companies and a lot of products. People always talk about how hucksters and, bad actors took over. It gave opportunity for hucksters and bad actors to suddenly get in your face and get your money. But it did the same thing for charities, right? And for these other organizations where, okay, why would I give put it to a can on the kind of, in the main office of my synagogue, but just drop some coins in the can, when I know now, shoot, I have all these different choices for my money, and this organization actually looks like they're doing good, but in the way that I want them to do good. And, you have choices. Whereas I don't think that was always the case. And it sounds like United Way is one of those like classic legacy brands that, or at the time was one of those classic legacy brands. It's like, resting on their laurels, so to speak, like already had the equity, already was getting a lot of money, had the kind of built-in subscription plan where you'd get money from employees all the time. It makes the marketing lazy, right?
Yeah.
Or non-existent.
I never really framed it that way in my head, but you're exactly right. It allows marketing to be lazy because you do have that, as you so aptly put it, that subscription plan. And to the point about competition, you even have new competition with individuals. I mean, a GoFundMe that somebody sets up, right, is competition for a charity.
Exactly.
It's no different. There's almost only so much share of wallet to go around. People will make a very finite decision on how much of my disposable income is going to go towards charity, right? And so it's only X. I can split it up so many ways. But then you have all of this new stuff that comes in. You've got, crisis of the week. Look at how many organizations are fundraising to help people in Ukraine. GoFundMe's get put up on a daily basis if somebody's trying to cover medical bills, if somebody has had some kind of issue. Yeah. So there's all of this new competition. It's a changing landscape. And what I will say is that, as Gen Xers, we were raised to do that and just give and put the money in the can. I remember as a kid, we would do I think it was a walkathon for muscular dystrophy with Jerry Lewis or something.
Yeah, you had to get the paper signed. You get somebody would pledge 10 cents a mile or whatever it is. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. We went to the same school apparently.
Yep, exactly. But now it's so different. People fundraise on Instagram. You can fundraise in any number of different ways. And, there's so many more charities today too. There's organizations that support anything you want to support. It wasn't that way when we were growing up. So it's a very fractured market, but there's only a finite share of wallet to be gained there.
Yeah.
And so when your marketing gets lazy, when you're not articulating, give it to us because of this. Even when I was at UPS, going back there for a minute, I had to market to our employees. Our campaign had been sort of stagnant and trending down. And part of the way that I marketed that was by shifting the focus, not just asking for money. I go back to check this box at your level. You're supposed to give this. And congratulations, you're a leadership giver. And here's a pin. I have a whole box of leadership pins somewhere. But the focus became for me on people. So if we were asking you to give $750, how many people was that going to impact and what was that going to do? So I worked to narrow our focus into a couple of programs. And really my message to the UPSers became that, supporting United Way is really good for our business because, for example, if you make or direct your contribution towards helping a family achieve financial stability and they get there as a result of your support, at some point, they're going to have disposable income. Disposable income translates to consumer spending. Consumer spending, more likely than not, means UPS is shipping a package. And as shareholders, that's a really good thing for all of us. So self-serving, but it works, right? I mean, it works on both ends in a real way. If you make that contribution and you support the community, it more than likely will come back and benefit the company. And that's really, this whole notion of triple bottom line and, some of the stuff that Michael Porter talked about years ago with if it's good for the company, it's good for the community, it's good for everybody.
Sure. Well, now we're all about stakeholder capitalism. You're hearing this all the time. And there's pros and cons to this, obviously, but these are discussions I'm having regularly in my role, leading a communications team for Lixil. But it's it makes sense, to connect the giving or the activity to a growth development or to some kind of a positive net gain for the company, right? I mean, because ultimately the company needs to grow and the company needs to do better. And that's how you improve the lives of the employees. That's how you improve the lives of your customers. That's how you then can free up even more funding and more brain power to focus on the good and the activities that you do. So it's kind of it's a very virtuous cycle when you think about it. And even if profit and growth is part of the motive, it's not the whole thing. It is, but it's not bad that it is, because it helps to drive all of the good as well. So it's something. Some people have issues with it. I think with just thinking that there's any profit involved at all, like they feel like it's dirty or something. But I'm not one of those people. Clearly, I just think that that good, doing good does come back at you, just like you said. There's a pay it forward. There's a karma to the whole thing, whatever you want to say, but there's a business case to be made. And it's interesting where, what you got me thinking about was you walk into this organization that clearly has archaic or non-existent marketing because, you're coming in as a CMO. You've had some dramatic success across various elements of UPS, and you've shown through your career that, you could deal with completely different businesses within the major corporation. You went from dealing with with the acquisition of Mailbox, et cetera, and UPS Store, into charitable giving later, and not to mention what the other experience that you had within there. So you get hired by this company, by this charitable organization, one of the world's largest, clearly because they needed your help, right? I mean, they knew that they needed the help. They knew they needed to get a hotshot marketer in to do the job. So they hire you in to do this job. You do a killer job for the first year, right? Here's where it goes weird and south. Like, what the hell got into them? I know, you're laughing now, but like it boggles the mind. And to me, it's even if there was a personality conflict, even if there was, whatever the case may be, why wouldn't you want to protect the asset that has turned around, your whole brand, your whole marketing culture, has brought 70% and later more than that. Like, what was the final number? 90% or something onto the new brand direction, unifying the message in a year, 2 years. So here you are, clearly a leader in the organization. You're the CMO. There's a C in your title. You're getting, I mean, in the book itself, you talk about this. I mean, you're getting fantastic, exceptional ratings in your performance, right? And then it all goes to shit because of one asshole, the Harasshole, right? Which clearly but it wasn't just that. There was an embedded systemic problem here. So I know it's a sensitive area, but I know you've been talking about a lot. Why the hell did this happen? I mean, take us through a little bit of it, without going too.
I'm actually laughing, and I have to give you thanks because of the way you framed it. And honestly, if we're having this conversation a year ago, 2 years ago, I would have been crying, not laughing. But it's a process and a journey. So, I think to catch everybody else up to speed, right? Because you've read the book.
Yeah.
So
yeah, please.
Everything was good for the first 2 years, and then the Harasshole arrived in the form of a candidate that I was asked by my boss, the CEO, to interview. This is somebody that came from a local United Way. I was interviewing him for a peer role on the executive team. And from minute one, when he showed up for the interview, he was inappropriate. I'd never met the guy. We're on audio, not video. I'm 5 feet tall, 5'4" with heels, right? Which I usually have on. But, this guy he's 6'2", kind of a bigger framed guy. I step out of my office to greet him, and he steps directly into my personal space, looks down at me, and proceeds to tell me that I'm intimidating.
Nice.
Yeah. You're here for an interview, and that's how you greet the interviewer. Fast forward, he was awkward and inappropriate during the interview. I shared with my boss my perspective on it, that candidate was technically competent to do the job. He had the skills, but there were some things that were off. We hired him anyway.
So your boss is the CEO, right?
My boss is the CEO. And,
The CEO.
when I shared with him that the candidate had told me that I was intimidating, his response to me was, well, Lisa, you are. I think like that's one of those moments in life where if I was a cartoon, over my head, you would have seen that thought bubble with all of the different color question marks kind of popping up. Because I'm like, what does this mean? I've just had two men tell me that I'm intimidating. And yet I don't have power over either of these men. One is my boss, one is a candidate I'm interviewing for a pure role. Like what is intimidating about me? I'm 5 feet tall. But
you had power.
I think as I thought about it, right, there was something about me that made them uncomfortable. But then, like, you question and go, is that my problem or is that their problem? And I've come to the conclusion it's their problem, not mine. It's taken me a little bit of work to get there, but not my problem. And so, and I don't mean that to be flip, but clearly there was something with them that didn't gel with a strong female. And so the candidate was hired. From minute one, he began harassing me. Every interaction I had with him was comments about my physical appearance. It was never about my work product, never about thought process, contributions, value I bring to the table. It was always something about my appearance, which again, sexual harassment is not about sex. It's about power. Mm-hmm. And if this person had already articulated that they found me to be intimidating, this was an attempt to, goes back to Spavo. I guess we're full circle, right?
Yeah.
But goes back to an attempt to kind of take power from somebody by reducing them or marginalizing them to an object. Mm-hmm. And so this continued into 2019. And I just kind of put up with it. But in February of 2019, I had two women on my team come to me to share with me that they had had inappropriate experiences with him as well. By policy, I was 110% obligated to go to HR. No ifs, ands, or buts. I mean, we had a very clear policy that if you even so much as suspected, or if somebody brought it to you, if you did not report it, you ran the risk of, circumstances up to and potentially including termination for failure to report it. We also had a zero retaliation policy. So
can I pause you there for just a sec? Because, zero retaliation, that's another thing we have to keep in mind. Listeners out there, so many of you are in the corporate world. You have to go through all this training all the time, at least once a year, harassment training and this and that. And oftentimes it's just like, okay, I'm going to watch the video. I'm going to click through because I'm not a harasser. Boom, 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 boom. But here you hear a story like this and you meet people who are actually on the receiving end of harassment. And I don't want to say victim, even though you were victimized, but you are not a victim, Lisa. I mean, you're a powerful person. So like, it's hard to say, that word, but it's just, maybe I'm quibbling. But anyway, you meet people with these experiences and you realize that those little videos really are doing everyone a severe disservice, right? Because it doesn't really put the real message through. But pay attention, because there are some very important points here about harassment. I mean, first of all, it is, and I'm not a lawyer. I'm going to just hey, disclaimer. I'm neither an HR nor am I a lawyer. I have no authority or standing to talk about this from an authoritative standpoint, but yet just a couple things that I know and I'm pretty sure of, and you can fact check me if you like to. But harassment is about it is a power issue, and it is about making somebody feel it's about unwelcome behavior. First of all, and obviously behavior that crosses the line is clearly harassment. So there's that kind of clear line where touching and that kind of unwelcome behavior is one thing, but even verbally making somebody feel uncomfortable and in a pattern of repeated unwelcome behavior where the recipient of the harassment, the harassed person, gives repeated indication like that this is unwelcome behavior as well, right? That's a solid straight up case of harassment and needs to be reported to HR. We're all required to, just like you said, to kind of, especially if you're a manager, in the company, you are required to go to HR and report what you've seen. But more than that, you have to be on the lookout for not only your own behavior, but what you see. So I'm doing a terrible job of explaining what harassment is, partly because it makes me uncomfortable, because should make me uncomfortable. But I've been through the trainings, and I've read your book, and and I've seen it firsthand myself, not in my current organization, thank goodness. But I've seen it in my career many a time. And I really hope that I'd never inadvertently did anything to anyone. I would hope that I would have been, kind of warned of that or something. I'm pretty sure I haven't. But it is something that I think people need to understand, that it's not a simple thing of, oh, somebody was touched and, got upset about it, or about being overly sensitive. It's not that. It is a repeated kind of, unwelcome behavior that actually causes distress and and makes the workplace a hostile place or an unwelcome place to be. I'm skirting the edge of it. What did I miss?
You actually did a great job. The only thing you missed is when you said I'm not a lawyer. I thought you were going to say that I did stay at a Holiday Inn last night. But
I play one on TV.
Yeah, but you didn't miss anything. I think you got it. It really is about unwanted behavior. And that behavior can be behavioral, it can be verbal, it can be physical, but you don't have to be touched for it to be harassment. And you said something that really resonated with me, and thank you for that, is I don't use the word victim. As you said, I was victimized, but I refuse to be a victim and be put into that. That's not to say that there are not people that are victims, and I don't mean to dismiss victimhood, if that's a word. As a marketer, I should know the word, right? But it is. For me, I don't look at myself as a victim. This is something that happened to me. It is not something that defines me or gives me a title. There's a lot of things, a lot of words I would use to describe me. Victim is not one of them. But you're right. When you go through that training, pay attention to it, because you have a responsibility as an employee to watch out for each other in the workplace. And so while we have a bad habit of just clicking through the training to get done with it, you really should pay attention, because this may be happening and you're not tuned into it. And if you see it happening, you need to go help that person.
Oh, 100%. And that comes through in your experience, certainly in your story. And that's what got you into a lot of trouble over at the United Way. And what I wanted to get at also from what you'd said, you had been told very inappropriately that you were intimidating. And, the interviewee, you could have chalked it up, like that who ultimately was the Harasshole. You could chalk that up to, okay, he's an awkward guy and he's a dick, and he's being a jerk off, and it is what it is. He's calling me intimidating. One thing, it's weird, right? I mean, obviously the first meeting, if, then when it happened again, then you're starting to establish a pattern, but at least that first time. But then when you went to see the CEO, he's like, well, you are intimidating. What kind of thing is that for a CEO to say? I mean, it implies a certain level of familiarity, but it also implies a deep-seated insensitivity that didn't do you any favors. But you reacted, and I'm getting this also from the book a little bit, but you reacted with that kind of, that those cartoon question marks coming out of your head. But it's like you had to analyze your own behavior to see, why are you intimidating, right? And that brings up one of the points you raise regularly, is that it's not you, right? Like the worst part of the harassment is that the victim, the one who is harassed, blames themselves. The first instinct is to go, what did I do? Why am I intimidating? Right. And maybe it's a good kind of mental exercise to do, or intellectual exercise to do afterwards. But clearly they had you right from the beginning. They put you on the edge, on the rails, and it didn't seem to end at that point. Just kept going.
That was just the tip of the iceberg, really. It got so much worse, and without taking everybody through every step of it, things finally culminated that
Because they hired that guy,
Oh
right? They
yeah,
hired the
they
Harasshole.
hired him. They hired him in 2017. In 2019, after I'd been putting up with this for maybe 14 months, that was when I had the two women come to me. Went to HR. 2 weeks after that, 3 weeks after that, he crossed a line with me that was just like the final straw. And I went back to HR this time on behalf of myself. And from that minute, Dan, like I had a target on my back. A few weeks later, in a conversation with my boss, the CEO, the Harasshhole's name came up in business context. And I said, are you aware of the fact that I've had to go to HR about him twice in the past couple of weeks? And his response was, yeah, I heard about that. You just need to learn to get along with him. And again, like the comment that he made by telling me I was intimidating, that should have been a yellow flag waving in my face. And I don't think at that point that I saw it that way, right? Because we tend to look inwards. Why am I intimidating this man? What is it that I'm doing? What should I be changing about me? When the reality is, right? The reality is like, yeah, you're the CEO. You've got all the power. If you're intimidated by me, don't know what to tell you. Right?
You have a problem.
Yeah.
You have a problem.
Yeah.
Not me, Lisa Bowman. You have a problem.
And by the way, I am not that problem. Right? Yeah. You've got something deep-seated in your psyche that is your issue. I am not your issue.
And this is the part that really starts to boggle the mind here. So things take a turn at that point after you actually reported the guy. But we'd already established that you've done amazing things as a marketer for the organization and built relationships with and across the franchisees, so to speak. I forget what they're called, but the presidents of the different United Ways across the whole world, essentially, and just created really strong relationships all around. The CEO clearly sees this. He's given you exemplary performance reviews, and this happens. And then, like a month later, after a couple of months after your exemplary performance review, you're downgraded. Right? Clearly, something's going on.
Yeah.
Right.
That something's called retaliation.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is like, first of all, it's horrific, but it's. I would imagine that you can't even like there's a cognitive dissonance that happens. Like, wait a second, is something happening to? Wait, what the hell? And it's not something you would necessarily realize. That does come through in the book a little bit, but like, I want to know really what. I can't even imagine what you would have felt like when you sort of like started to go, holy crap, everybody's out to get me. Because am I paranoid? What's going on?
I didn't put it together until months later. It was like all these little things started happening, right? I was downgraded on my performance with no explanation and candidly no justification, like nothing had changed. I had resources taken away from me, but the work didn't go, right? The resources were stripped, handed to the Harasshole, by the way, which just set up further opportunity for headbutting and bad stuff. And it really wasn't, I was taken off the agenda for board meetings, left out of meetings that critical decisions were being made at, right? So it was like everything was being done to try and trap me, if you will, or screw up my performance, or get me to quit or whatever it was. I'm not in the man's head, so I don't know exactly what it was, but it wasn't until a couple months later when I started like documenting and going, all right, wait a minute. All this stuff has happened. Let me look at this. Since I reported this, here's a little laundry list of things that have happened. Oh, holy shit. I'm being retaliated against. Like it wasn't crystal clear to me in the moment. There was another little piece to it too, which was that I was also instructed to fire one of my employees for no reason, who had also gone to HR about her interactions with this individual. And I was instructed on multiple occasions to terminate this person with no cause. And I refused to do it. I don't think that this man was ever used to having somebody say no to him. So, here I am, all little 5 feet of me, intimidating as hell, and now telling him no. But, I, you know, I, I couldn't in good conscience fire somebody for no reason. And there was literally no reason. This is one of my top performers. This employee was one of the top performers in the organization. And out of nowhere, I'm told, just get rid of her. I said,
it's hard to fire people too. I mean, it's one of the worst things. That
it's awful.
if you're a human person, it's one of the worst things to go through. And clearly it's worse for the person who's getting fired normally, but I've spoken to many people who are in the same boat. I mean, who have fired people, or I've had to let a few people go in my time. And damn it, I feel terrible for the people that we had to let go, and I feel like they really got the shit end of the stick there. But honestly, it's horrible for the person doing the hiring too. I mean, I doing the firing too. It's really, really heartbreaking, and you carry that with you for a long time.
It's one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do, even in a case where it's justified, right? If somebody's truly not performing, if somebody has breached an integrity issue or stolen from the company or something. And I've had that happen in my career. I remember, and I don't want to give too many details on this, but there was somebody that I had to fire for stealing at an organization that I worked at. And she was flat out cold busted. I mean, she was stealing. And I remember I had to take her down to a conference room with HR there and get her into the conference room. And then I was told to leave. And the police were there. She ended up getting arrested and taken out of the building. And as she was being taken out, she was, yelling and yelling at me. What am I supposed to do now? I'm a single mom. And Dan, even though she had done wrong, she deserved to lose her job. Candidly, she deserved to be arrested because she was right on the border between a misdemeanor and a felony with what she had stolen. Yeah. I went home and I cried that night. I cried. I was like, this person just lost their job. I was responsible for that, but I wasn't, right? She was responsible. But every time I've had to fire somebody, it never gets easier. No. It never gets easier. It's a horrible thing to do. And so one of the things that I talk about in the book is there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. It's never a good thing to do, but there's a human way to do it. And I can tell you that when things finally got to the end point with me, where I lost my job, it was done in a really horrific way.
So you had just to catch everybody up, you've been going through this, kind of building, accelerating kind of harassment situation, intensifying. It's maybe is the better way to say it. Harassment situation since 2017, 2 years. You're dealing with this Harasshole. Clearly, he's one of the old boys and doesn't get any kind of punishment. In fact, he gets rewarded through his time there. While things are getting heated up with you. When you finally report him, the retaliation begins. Part of that retaliation is your team or parts of your team are taken away and given to him, and that your work gets harder with resources taken away, but still the workload gets maintained. It's typical kind of nonsense where they're trying to force you out, right? Force kind of slips, and and then all of this builds up to where are we now? January 2020? Is that where we're at?
We are.
Okay, so all this builds up to January 2020, and then you get called to the CEO office.
Yep.
The wrong way.
Yeah. Yep. First week of the year, I was called in randomly. Again, these are the things that stick in your mind. Thursday afternoon, 1:00. And basically, he spent 10 minutes talking about the new house he had just bought in Hilton Head and that they had spent the holiday there, blah, blah, blah. Didn't so much as inquire about me, my holiday, anything. Leaned back, put his hands behind his head and said, you know what? I don't need you anymore. Go get with HR and work something out.
Fuck.
Yeah. This is exactly what I was saying in my head.
Yeah. I mean, we welcome potty mouth in the right situation here on the show. And that's one of them. I mean, what the holy land of fuck was that? Is kind of when I saw that, when I read it, when I heard you say it, like how I don't, it boggles the mind again. So this guy he pulls you in, and that's what he says. I don't need you. Take care. Bye bye.
Yep, pretty much. I mean,
Work it out.
I was so flabbergasted. I was like, well, wait a minute. There's nothing for me to do here. You don't have a role for me, a reduced role, as something? Nope.
And it's crazy. He had you kind of becoming a desperate person, which is what he seems like he wanted to do. You know, it's awful what they did to you.
It was bad.
I'm sorry.
It honestly, like, I can't even sugarcoat it. It was bad. But the thing is that, and again, I don't want to call him names, and so I won't, but his approach, his behavior was really stupid and unintelligent. There was no HR person in the room with us. They had no package prepared for me. They had nothing. And so essentially what happened is I was told by the next morning, I called HR. The COO oversaw HR, and she honestly was an enabler of this whole situation. You know, there's a whole backstory there that we don't have time for tonight. But
got to read the book for that.
Got to read the book, exactly. But she enabled all of this, and so when I spoke with her the next day, she basically said, like, we don't have anything prepared for you, which means that I'm not even sure that she knew this was coming, right? Because again, it was just a cluster from the word go. So I was told to just, keep working, be quiet, and they would get a package for me. So this was on a Friday. The following Monday and Tuesday, we had our beginning of the year executive retreat. And I was forced to participate in this retreat because nobody knew about this. I was supposed to keep quiet and just keep working. So I show up. I'm doing my damnedest to participate, to contribute, to act like everything is normal, knowing that I'm not going to be there.
Yeah. I mean, did you do that because you felt it was the right thing to do, or did you do that because you were worried that, they were going to not give you a package, or was like, what was going through your head when you're like actually continuing to do work?
I think for me, it's about how I carry myself and my level of professionalism. And I was not going to let the CEO see me crack. I was going to show up. I was going to do my job, which I did, by the way, until the very last minute that I was employed there. But I had to sit through this retreat. And so mid-morning on the first day, here I am thinking that nobody in the room knows except for the COO and the CEO, right? And I get up to go to the restroom, and I'm followed into the restroom by our US president, who was a woman. Needed to clarify that since she followed me into the restroom.
Good.
Yeah, but she followed me into the restroom. She grabbed me by the arm and she said, I don't even know how you're sitting here and conducting yourself the way that you are, knowing what's happening. And I looked at her and I said, what do you mean? And she's like, well, because like you're leaving and you're sitting here and you're contributing and being professional. And I looked at her and I was like, She's like, yeah, we all know. I wanted nothing more than, honestly, for the floor in the ladies' room to just swallow me up so I didn't need to go back into that room. But again, like, that's not who I am. So I'm like, you know what? All right, Bowman, stand up straight on your 4-inch heels, hold your head up, and you are walking back into that room, and you are not going to let these people see you get rattled. And I finished going through the retreat. I contributed. I helped with the business planning process. And it wasn't until days later that they actually gave me a package. By that point, I had gotten an attorney involved. And I continued to work into February. My very last day was the day so when you get a package offer, if you're over 40, you have 21 days to consider that offer.
Is that a federal rule, or was that local to?
I don't know, because
Virginia?
I do know that there are people that were younger than that had been given packages and had 21 days to consider. So I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn last night. I don't feel like I'm qualified to answer that, but I had 21 days to consider, and I've read in various places that when you're over 40, that's the consideration period. So it was on that very last day. The other thing is that they're not allowed to pressure you to sign separation paperwork.
Right.
And yet they did, right? The COO was coming in, harassing me. Where's your paperwork? I said, my attorney will be in contact. So my last day there, I prepped with, and I didn't know it was going to be my last day that morning, but I prepped a new hire of mine to go out and do presentations to the network, dry ran it with him, made sure that he was solid. And then I ended up leaving a little bit early because we were having the threat of snow. And in DC, when it snows, everything shuts down,
yeah.
right? So I was like, you know what, let me get to the airport because the last thing I want is to be stuck here. And so at the airport, I saw an email come through from my attorney to United Way's general counsel. And then about 10 minutes later, my email stopped working. So I was supposed to work through the next 2 weeks. I had network meetings set up in New York with the TV stations. I had offered to make sure that the TV spots continued to run. Like I was doing my job until the very last minute, leaving them in good shape because that's just how I roll. And they flipped the switch, they cut me off, and now we've been embroiled in the legalities of this since March of 2020.
So 2 years and 3 months, 4 months, 4 months.
Yeah, who's counting at this point?
Yeah. But so the legalities continue. So there still hasn't been resolution to this. And if you read the book, you'll know a little bit more about the details and the EEOC filings and how that is all working. And as of the time of this recording, I mean, we're recording here in July. I mean, this will probably go live in September, October-ish, maybe. So we have a couple of months. Hopefully by then, if things might change, and if that's the case, I'll update the notes to kind of show that. But it's a slow process, and you've been dealing with this now, the legal side of it since then. And look, I mean, they pulled the rug out, they flicked the switch, left you in the cold, and then you were in the cold, like literally, because it was snowy weather.
Yeah.
Flew back home and started to put your life back together. And I know that if I had a lot more time, I would just continue to ask you questions about like, what was that like, and how did you do that? We're sort of running toward the end of the show here, but what I wanted to do though is circle back a little bit. I'm going to go a little long, which is a little longer than usual, but let's get to the part where you go through that transition from being the chief marketing officer, doing the work that you are, one of the best people around. I mean, I'm not just saying that because I'm sitting here talking to you. You've been awarded. You have won Marketer of the Year. You are on the American Marketing Association. You are on the board of, as a, you're heading the ethics committee, right? Are you still on the ethics committee, or did you roll off? Or
so our term just ended. We're headed into a new board term. So I'm poised to be chair-elect for the national board.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, so it'll take place next July.
The chair-elect for the whole shebang?
Correct.
For the American Marketing Association.
For the national board.
Right?
Yep.
So, okay. Clearly you are involved in the profession and very active in it and have made massive contributions back to the profession in addition to all the great work that you've done in your organizations. And yet here you are 2 years later after you've been retaliated against, you've you've been put through the ringer, experienced something nobody should experience. And you're still having trouble to have people, take you seriously as a CMO. That's astounding to me. And maybe it's not, maybe take you seriously is the wrong word, but it's ridiculous that people aren't like scooping you up in a femtosecond, if you don't mind me saying so.
Yeah, I'm going to be really vulnerable here for a second. And I want to walk a fine line because I don't want to dissuade anybody that's in this situation from speaking out for fear of like career suicide. But I will tell you, it's been incredibly difficult to find a job. And because of this specifically, I'll tell you two quick examples. I had a job offer last year in the spring of 2021. The job offer got rescinded because a board member at the organization had a problem with the fact that I went public, and they ended up rescinding the offer. I had an interview in this July, I had an interview in March of this year for a CMO role. It was down to me and one other candidate. And the hiring manager, the president of the organization, who happened to be female, during the interview, looked at me and said, listen, I read some of what happened at United Way, and I don't really have an issue with it because, all of us in the C-suite have put up with that at one point or another. But I just need to know that if I give you this job, I need an assurance from you that you won't be a problem here. And I withdrew from the search. I got through the rest of the interview and came home and dropped her a note and just told her, no. And, we're in a place, and again, this is not a Lisa Bowman pity party because I don't do that, but we're in a place where employers are talking about the fact that they can't hire, they can't keep people, they can't find people. We have a labor shortage. I can't get a job. And
CMOs.
I got to say, Dan, but that's the first time that I've ever said this on a podcast out loud, because there are people at United Way, people that were at United Way, that are going to take great pleasure in hearing that. Mm-hmm. And I have not wanted to give them that satisfaction, but I'm going to say that out loud here, and I just did.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. I will tell you, if you're listening and you happen to be in the United Way, I doubt any of my listeners are United Way employees, but if you're listening, you happen to be United Way, or you happen to be one of those people who, maybe God forbid you're the Harasshole himself. I don't know. But if you happen to be listening, this is a transition and a metamorphosis of a human person that we're looking at here. This is not like, you did something and you caused a career to end. What's happened here is you've actually, to kind of, again, go full circle, Lisa's gone through a cycle here. You took power back. You told your story. You keep telling your story. You've written a hell of a book. I mean, how many times have I said on the show, I'm writing a book. I want to write a book. I think I should write a book. Mm-hmm. This is a book. I mean, this is a solid piece of work that really, you put it all out there. So there's the achievements are piling up, I think. And it can't go anywhere but up, because this is just tremendous work. You're contributing something important to the profession, to women everywhere who should read this book and kind of, be aware of what's going on, to men who might put themselves in shitty situations and do the wrong thing and make the wrong choices. It's ridiculous. So the amount of good that you've done that's come out of this terrible experience, I think, still has yet to be measured. And I'm a Lisa Bowman fan, and I don't think, I think my listeners certainly would be too if they met you. And I just want to say that the end of the book, the last couple of pages, is like a primer for people on harassment and what it means and what the process you go through is to report it, and everything about the EEOC, and just solid, good, useful information for if you happen to be in this kind of situation, but also it could be used to think about the things to look out for. But you're doing tremendous good is the point I want to make. And fuck them. Honestly, you're sitting here, clearly a powerful woman with amazing marketing and communications achievements, and that's kind of where I wanted to sort of drive this at the end here, right? The end of our conversation. You're a marketer. You call yourself a marketect, right? I love that. You're a brand evangelist. Big fan of portmanteaus, which is a good thing. You have a lot of contributions to make and yet to make, and I just want to know, where do you want to go from here, and what is it? Not necessarily that you're looking for, because I think you have a good purpose, but where should you be employing your purpose? Where do you want to continue that journey?
I've spent some time reflecting on that, and I have a ton of value to bring, right? And whether that is bringing it to a company who will value how I reacted in this situation and says, you know what, we want somebody like that, that's a badass marketer and has integrity and will help us avoid risk. So whether it's following that path or whether it's working as a consultant, as I have been, and doing freelance, which is good because I enjoy it. It lets me do a bunch of different things. So either path like that, I'm good. My thing is I want to work with good people who want to do good work. That's what it's really all about for me. And I'm going to continue to speak about this, not in the sense of being vindictive or revengeful towards my former employer. It's not about that, but there are thousands of women that deal with this every single day. And from my perspective, if it could happen to me as a C-level female, what happens at lower levels. What happens to women that don't know what to do, don't know how to fight back. There were things that I didn't know that I learned in the process. I feel an obligation to pay it forward and to share my experience. So, I'm going to do a little bit of a shameless plug here, but I'm looking to do some public speaking. And so if anybody wants me to come speak about this, I'm happy to do it. I look at it as sort of my way of giving back and my way of educating other people how to navigate this situation.
Yeah. And I would highly recommend getting Lisa to speak. She's very dynamic, in case you haven't noticed during our conversation. But it's just incredible the level of, marketing and communications know-how, plus this horrifying experience. There's a sort of Venn diagram there that puts you in a pretty interesting niche that you go to, talk to people and help them learn more about, what this is all about. But I mean, the book itself is fantastic and should be read. Anybody who's in a corporate environment, especially, would get something out of the book. But it's a very personal book. It's written almost like a memoir with some vignettes in here that are very touching, but really a journey into sort of this dark place, and that how it happened is sort of just snuck up on you. And you get that feeling as you go through the book. It's like, oh, there's an incident. Oh, there's another incident. Wait, there's 3 incidents. Hold on just a second. What the hell just happened? And that seems to be the journey that you went through in your own mind as well. And I thank you for bringing us through that and for sharing that, and for being vulnerable on the show. Makes me feel privileged and certainly humbled that you feel like you're comfortable enough to do that with me. And for that reason, you're welcome back anytime, of course.
Be careful what you offer.
Oh no, please come back. I don't ever have 2 people on the show at once. I mean, I had one time, but I would love to have you and Adrian together at once. Just maybe throw a question out there and sit back and watch you guys go. That would be hysterical.
Hey, I'm in.
It'd be powerful. Adrian, if you're listening, or she's going to listen to this, so Adrian A. Wallace, you will be contacted. But everybody out there, Harasshole. It's a portmanteau of harass and asshole. You can find it on Amazon, and you should order it and buy it. Go to harasshole.com to learn more about it, or to learn more about Lisa. Check out Lisa Bowman, and her name we spelled properly in the episode title, but Bowman on LinkedIn. Please reach out to her. It's Lisa Bowman is the Twitter handle. Is there any way else that people can reach you, Lisa? Did I cover them all?
Carrier pigeons, smoke signals. I don't know. I think you got the big ones.
Potentially at a Holiday Inn, when you're looking for a lawyer. So any last words, Lisa, before we run?
No, Dan, I want to thank you for the conversation. Your show has got such a nice flow to it where it's conversational, and you do a great job of just making people comfortable and letting the conversation go where it goes. And to your listener, I think that just brings nice joy and a good journey to go on. I know I've certainly listened to the show before being on it, and I've always enjoyed it. So thanks for the opportunity to have the conversation.
Thanks so much. And I loved having you on, and I really wish I could have gone deeper into certain places, but the only thing limiting us is time, and we'll have to do it again some other time. But Lisa, I'm a fan, and you know where I am, and I look forward to having you on again. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.